Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Woram. I'm about to read the last chapter of Flat Stanley, his original adventure. We are on chapter 5, and the last time we read, we found out that Stanley was considered a hero. So let's find out what happens in chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Author's Good Idea. For a while, Stanley Lambchop was a famous name. Everywhere that Stanley went, people stared and pointed at him. He could hear them whisper, "Over there, Agnes, over there. That must be Stanley Lambchop, the one who caught the sneaky thieves." And things like that. But after a few weeks, the whispering and staring stopped. Let me show you the picture. People had other things to think about. Stanley did not mind. Being famous had been fun, but enough was enough. And then came further change, and it was not a pleasant one. People began to laugh and make fun of him as he passed by. "Hello, super skinny," they would shout, and even ruder things about the way he looked. Stanley told his parents how he felt. "It's the other kids I mostly mind," he said. "They don't like me anymore because I'm different. Flat." "Shame on them," Mrs. Lambchop said. "It is wrong to dislike people for their shapes, or their religion for that matter, or the color of their skin." "I know," Stanley said. "Only maybe it's impossible for everybody to like everybody." "Perhaps," said Mrs. Lambchop, "but they can try." Later that night, Arthur Lambchop was woken by the sound of crying. In the darkness, he crept across the room and knelt by Stanley's bed. "Are you okay?" he said. "Go away," Stanley said. "Don't be mad at me," Arthur said. "You're still mad because I let you get tangled that day when you were my kite, I guess." "Skip it, will you?" Stanley said. "I'm not mad. Go away." "Please, let's be friends." Arthur couldn't help crying a little bit. "Oh, Stanley," he said, "please tell me what's wrong." Stanley waited for a while before he spoke. "The thing is," he said, "I'm not just happy anymore. I'm tired of being flat. I want to be in regular shape again, like other people. But I have to keep on being flat forever. It makes me sick." "Oh, Stanley," Arthur said. He dried his tears in the corner of Stanley's sheet and could think of nothing more to say. Don't talk about what I just said." Stanley told him, "I don't want the folks to worry. That would only make things worse." "You're brave," Arthur said. "You really are." He took hold of Stanley's hand. The two brothers sat together in the darkness, being friends. They were both still sad, but each one felt a little better than they had before. And then suddenly, though he was not trying to think, Arthur had an idea. He jumped up and turned on the light and ran to the big storage box where the toys and other things were kept. He began to rummage in the box. Stanley sat up in bed to watch. Arthur flung aside a football and some lead soldiers, airplane models, and lots of wooden blocks. And then he said, "Ha-ha!" He had found what he wanted, an old bicycle pump. He held it up. Stanley and he looked at each other. Okay. What do you think they're going to do with that? But it might take a while, but take it easy. Put it in the end pump of the hose by his mouth and clamped his lips tight, about so tight that no air could escape. I'll go slowly, Arthur said. If it hurts or anything, wiggle your hand at me. He began to pump. First, nothing happened except Stanley's cheeks bulged a little bit. Arthur watched his hand. There was no wiggling sign, so he pumped on. Then suddenly, Stanley's top half began to swell. It's working, shouted Arthur, pumping away. Stanley spread his arms so that the air could go inside him more easily. He got bigger and bigger, and the buttons on his pajamas top burst off. Pop, pop, pop. A moment more, he was all round out, head and body, arms and legs, but not his right foot. That foot stayed flat. Arthur stopped pumping. It's like trying to do the very last bit of those long balloons, he said. Maybe a shake would help. Stanley shook his right foot twice, and a little swooshing sound, and it swelled out to match his left one. There stood Stanley Lambchop as he used to be, as if he had never been flat at all. Thank you, Arthur, Stanley said. Thank you very much. The brothers were shaking hands when Mr. Lambchop strode into the room, and Mrs. Lambchop right behind him. We heard you, said Mr. Lambchop. Up talking when you ought to be asleep, eh? Shame on you. George! Mrs. Lambchop. Stanley's round again. You're right, said Mr. Lambchop, noticing. Good for you, Stanley. I'm the one who did it, Arthur said. I blew him up. Everyone was terribly excited and happy. Of course, Mrs. Lambchop made hot chocolate to celebrate the occasion, and this is difficult without a cameraman. And toasts were drunk to Arthur for his cleverness. When the little party was over, Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop tucked the boys back into their beds and kissed them, and then they turned out the light. Good night, they said. Good night, said Stanley and Arthur. It had been a long, tiring day. Very soon, all the Lambchops were asleep. The end. So we finished the book, Flat Stanley and His Original Adventure. What did you think? Did you think he'd be flat the whole time? Did you ever think he would come back to his original size? Why didn't they think about that before going ahead and pumping it? So very interesting. All right. I'll pick a new book for next time. See you later, friends. Bye-bye.